My name is Daniel Harper, and I've been married to Jessica for 12 years. We met in college, where she was the radiant girl with chestnut hair and a laugh that could light up a room. I was the quiet engineering student who somehow caught her eye. Back then, our life felt like a dream. Simple, sweet, and full of promise. We built a home together in a quiet suburb outside Portland, a craftsman-style house with a wraparound porch and a garden she tended with care. I worked as a structural engineer, steady and predictable, while Jessica ran a small boutique downtown, selling handmade jewelry and vintage dresses. Our days were routine, comfortable, and I thought unbreakable. But lately, something had shifted. It started with small things: her phone buzzing late at night, her stepping out of the room to take calls, her coming home later than usual with vague excuses about inventory or a late shipment. I didn't press her. I trusted her. Jessica had always been the free spirit to my grounded nature, and I loved that about her. Maybe I loved it too much, because it blinded me to the cracks forming beneath our perfect life. One Tuesday evening, I came home early from a site inspection. The house was quiet, the kind of stillness that feels heavy. Her car wasn't in the driveway, though she texted me she'd be home by 6. I shrugged it off, poured myself a glass of bourbon, and settled into the armchair by the window. That's when I saw it, a glint of silver on the coffee table. Her wedding ring. She never took it off, not even to shower. My stomach tightened. I picked it up, the metal cold against my fingers, and noticed a folded piece of paper tucked beneath a magazine. It was a receipt from a hotel downtown, dated 2 nights ago. The name on it wasn't mine. It was his, Mark Grayson, a real estate developer I'd met once at a charity event Jessica had dragged me to. My mind raced. She told me she was at the boutique late that night working on a display. I sat there, the receipt trembling in my hand, the bourbon forgotten. The room spun as I pieced together the fragments. Her late nights, her distracted smiles, the ring left behind like an afterthought. I didn't confront her that night. She came home at 9, breezy and apologetic, claiming a last-minute customer had kept her. I nodded, smiled, and said nothing. But inside, a storm was brewing. I needed proof, something undeniable, before I let the rage spill out. The next morning, I called in sick. Jessica left for the boutique, her usual kiss on my cheek feeling like a blade. I waited until her car disappeared around the corner. Then I started digging. Her laptop sat on the kitchen counter, password protected, but I knew her habits. She reused the same password for everything, our anniversary 0612. It unlocked with a soft chime, and I felt a pang of guilt that quickly drowned in adrenaline. Her email was a mess of boutique orders and spam, but then I found it, a thread buried in her deleted folder. Messages from Mark. They started innocently enough, businesslike, about a potential collaboration for her store. But they shifted, growing warmer, flirtatious. "Can't stop thinking about you," one read. "Meet me tonight," another. The dates matched her late nights. My chest burned as I scrolled, each word a hammer against the life I thought we had. Then I saw the photos. Attached in one email, time-stamped a week ago. Jessica, in a hotel room, her hair tousled, smiling at the camera in a way she hadn't smiled at me in years. Mark's arm was around her, his grin smug and possessive. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the laptop. I needed more. I grabbed my keys and drove to her boutique. It was mid-morning, quiet, the closed sign still up. Through the window, I saw her inside, laughing with a man I recognized instantly. Mark. He leaned close, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and she didn't pull away. My hands clenched into fists. I could have stormed in, shattered their little moment, but I didn't. Not yet. Revenge, I decided, would be colder, sharper, more deliberate. I drove home, my mind a tangle of fury and calculation. That night, I pretended everything was fine. Jessica chattered about her day, oblivious to the storm in my eyes. I nodded, ate the dinner she'd made, and waited. She didn't notice the missing laptop. She didn't notice me slipping her phone from her purse while she showered, unlocking it with the same password, and forwarding every damning message to myself. Days passed, and I became a ghost in my own life. I went to work, smiled at colleagues, came home to Jessica's cheerful lies. But behind the mask, I was gathering pieces, building a plan. I hired a private investigator, a grizzled man named Tom with a gravelly voice and no questions. I gave him the emails, the receipt, the photo. "Follow them," I said. "I need everything." Tom delivered. Within a week, he handed me a folder thick with evidence. Timestamps, photos, even audio from a discreet recorder he'd planted in Mark's car. Jessica's voice, soft and giddy, promising Mark she'd find a way to spend the weekend with him. Mark's laugh, arrogant and assured, saying he'd make it worth her while. They were planning a trip to a cabin up the coast, leaving Friday. My birthday was Saturday. The irony twisted the knife deeper. I studied the photos. Jessica slipping into Mark's sleek black Audi, their hands brushing as they walked into the hotel, her head resting on his shoulder at a cafe. Each image carved away another piece of the man I'd been. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat in my office, the folder spread across my desk, and let the anger harden into something lethal. Friday came. Jessica packed a small bag, told me she was visiting her sister in Seattle for a girls' weekend. I kissed her goodbye, my lips cold against hers, and watched her drive off. Tom texted me an hour later. She'd met Mark at a gas station outside town, and they were headed north. I waited until night fell, then I packed my own bag. Not clothes, but tools. A crowbar, duct tape, a hunting knife I'd bought years ago for a camping trip we never took. I drove up the coast, the folder on the passenger seat, Tom's updates lighting up my phone. The cabin was remote, tucked into a pine forest overlooking the ocean. I parked a mile away, hiked through the dark, my breath fogging in the cold. Their cars were there, lights glowing through the windows. I stood in the shadows, watching. Jessica's laugh floated out, followed by Mark's low murmur. My grip tightened on the crowbar. I didn't act that night. I watched, letting the scene burn into my mind. Jessica in a sweater I'd bought her, pouring wine, Mark's hand on her back. I wanted to break down the door, to let the fury loose, but timing was everything. I retreated to my car, slept fitfully, and woke to a plan fully formed. Saturday morning, my birthday, I called Tom. "I need you to do something," I said. He listened, no judgment, just a grunt of agreement. By noon, he'd rigged Mark's car. Nothing fatal, just a slow leak in the brake line, enough to strand them. I waited until dusk, then drove back to the cabin. Their cars were still there, but the Audi's hood was up, Mark cursing as he fiddled with the engine. Jessica stood nearby, arms crossed, shivering in the evening chill. I approached on foot, silent, the crowbar heavy in my hand. Mark didn't see me until I was 10 feet away. "Daniel?" he said, startled, wiping grease from his hands. Jessica turned, her face paling. What are you doing here?" she stammered. "Happy birthday to me," I said, my voice flat. I dropped the folder at her feet, photos spilling out. She stared, mouth open, no words coming. Mark stepped forward, hands raised. "Look, man, let's talk about this." I swung the crowbar, catching him in the knee. He crumpled, howling, and Jessica screamed. "Daniel, stop!" she cried, lunging toward me. I shoved her back. Not hard, just enough to keep her away. "You don't get to talk," I said. "Not anymore." Mark groaned, clutching his leg. I duct-taped his hands behind him, dragged him inside, and tied him to a chair. Jessica followed, sobbing, begging. I ignored her, taping her wrists too, securing her to the couch. The cabin smelled of pine and betrayal, and I stood there, breathing it in, letting the weight of what came next settle over me. The room was silent except for Mark's labored breathing and Jessica's muffled sobs through the tape over her mouth. I'd removed it from her wrists, letting her sit, but her eyes were wild with fear. Mark glared at me, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead where he'd hit the floor. I paced, the crowbar still in my hand, its weight grounding me. "You thought I wouldn't find out," I said, my voice low, steady. You thought I was too stupid, too trusting. I pulled out my phone, played the audio Tom had captured. Jessica's voice, promising Mark a future, laughing about how I'd never suspect. Her eyes widened, tears spilling faster. Mark shifted, testing the tape, but it held. I turned to Jessica. 12 years. I gave you everything. My time, my loyalty, my heart. And you threw it away for him. I pointed the crowbar at Mark, who flinched. A guy who smells like cheap cologne and thinks he's God's gift. I stepped closer to her, kneeling so we were eye level. Why? She shook her head, words tumbling out in a rush. I didn't mean it, just happened, Daniel, I swear. I still love you. Stop. I cut her off, standing abruptly. Don't lie to me now. You don't get to rewrite this. I turned to Mark. And you? Did you enjoy it? Taking what's mine? He spat blood onto the floor. She came to me, man. I didn't force her. I swung the crowbar again, this time into his shoulder. He yelled, the chair tipping sideways. Jessica shrieked, pulling at her restraints. I righted the chair, leaned in close. You're going to wish you'd never met her. I spent the next hour dismantling their world. I burned the photos in the fireplace, the flames licking at their smiling faces. I smashed Mark's phone, then hers, grinding the pieces under my boot. I found a suitcase in the bedroom. Hers, packed with lingerie I'd never seen. I dumped it out, tore it apart with the knife, and tossed it into the fire too. Every shred of their affair, I erased, while they watched, helpless. But that wasn't enough. I needed them to feel the depth of my pain. The betrayal's sting mirrored back. I untied Mark's hands, handed him the knife. Cut her free, I said. He hesitated, then obeyed, his hands shaking. Jessica rubbed her wrists, staring at me like I was a stranger. Maybe I was. Now, I said, you're going to pay. Not with your lives. I'm not that merciful. With something worse. I smiled, cold and empty, and the real revenge began to take shape. The fire crackled in the cabin, casting flickering shadows across Jessica's tear-streaked face and Mark's bruised, defiant one. I stood over them, the knife back in my hand, the crowbar resting against the wall. The air was thick with tension, the kind that presses down until it's hard to breathe. I destroyed their little tokens, the photos, the phones, the suitcase, but that was just the prelude. I wanted them to carry this, to feel it in their bones long after I was gone. Stand up, I told Jessica. She hesitated, her eyes darting to Mark, then back to me. Now, I barked, and she scrambled to her feet, trembling. Mark stayed in the chair, his shoulders slumped from the blow, his gaze a mix of fear and fury. I pointed the knife at him. You too. Up. He rose slowly, wincing, favoring his injured knee. I gestured them toward the center of the room, where a rug lay askew from our earlier scuffle. You're going to tell me everything, I said. Every detail. When it started, where you met, what you did. Don't leave anything out. Jessica shook her head, her voice a broken whisper. Daniel, please, don't make me. You don't get to decide, I snapped. You lost that right when you walked out on us. Start talking. I stepped closer, the knife glinting in the firelight, and she flinched. Mark put a hand on her arm, a protective gesture that made my blood boil. I shoved him back, and he stumbled, catching himself against the wall. It was last summer, Jessica began, her voice barely audible, at that charity event. Mark was there, we talked about the boutique, and it just grew from there. She swallowed, her eyes fixed on the floor. We met for coffee a few times, then lunches. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. But it did, I said, my tone flat. Keep going. She recounted the months. Secret meetings at hotels, stolen moments in his car, weekends she'd lied about. Mark filled in gaps, his voice gruff, admitting to booking rooms, sending her gifts. Each word was a shard of glass, cutting deeper, but I kept my face stone cold, absorbing it all. When they finished, I nodded, letting the silence stretch. Then I turned to Mark. You're a businessman, right? Good with deals. He frowned, unsure where I was going. Here's mine. You're going to leave her. Walk away right now and never contact her again. Or I make sure everyone, your clients, your family, your precious reputation, knows exactly what you are. His jaw tightened. You can't. I can, I said, pulling out a USB drive from my pocket. Copies of everything. Emails, photos, that audio. Enough to bury you. His eyes widened, and Jessica gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. I'd planned this, had Tom back up every piece of evidence. Leverage was my weapon now. Mark stared at the USB drive, his bravado crumbling. You're bluffing, he said, but his voice wavered. I didn't respond, just held his gaze until he looked away. Jessica sank onto the couch, her sobs quieter now, resigned. I stepped toward the fireplace, tossing another log in, letting the heat build. Here's how this works, I continued. Mark, you leave tonight. You drive back to Portland, alone. If I hear you've so much as texted her, this goes public. Your business collapses, your wife finds out. Assuming she doesn't already know what a snake you are. I turned to Jessica. And you're coming home with me, not because I want you back, but because you don't get to run off into some fantasy. You're going to face this. She looked up, confusion and dread in her eyes. What do you mean? You'll see, I said, cryptic, letting her imagination churn. I untied Mark completely, shoving him toward the door. Go. Now. He hesitated, glancing at Jessica, but her head was bowed, her hands clasped tight. He grabbed his jacket, limped out into the night, and I watched his car's taillights fade down the dirt road. The brake leak would slow him down, maybe strand him. Good. Jessica sat there, small and fragile, a far cry from the woman I'd married. I cut her remaining ties, pointed to the car keys on the table. Drive us home, I said. She obeyed, silent. The ride back a tense, wordless void. The house felt foreign when we stepped inside, her ring still on the coffee table where I'd left it. I made her sleep in the guest room, locking the door from the outside. She didn't protest. The next morning, I started phase 2. I called her sister, Emily, who lived in Seattle. Jessica's been lying to you, I said, voice calm. She wasn't with you this weekend. She was with Mark Grayson. Emily's shock crackled through the line, followed by anger. I gave her just enough dates, places, then hung up. Within hours, Jessica's phone, which I'd kept, buzzed with furious texts from Emily, calling her out, cutting ties. I let Jessica see them, her face crumpling as her family turned on her. Then I hit her business. I contacted her suppliers, her regular customers, dropping hints about her unreliability. Nothing provable, just whispers. Orders slowed, cancellations trickled in. Her boutique, her pride, began to wither. She noticed, begged me to stop, but I just smiled. You built this mess, I said. Live in it. Weeks passed, and the house became a battlefield of silence. Jessica moved like a shadow, her eyes hollow, her spirit broken. I didn't relent. Every day, I chipped away at her world. I leaked the affair to mutual friends, framing it as her betrayal, watching as invitations dried up, as her social circle shrank. She'd always thrived on connection. Now, she had none. Mark, true to my threat, stayed away. Tom kept tabs, reporting he'd returned to his wife, playing the contrite husband. I didn't care about his redemption. I mailed his wife an anonymous envelope, blurred photos, snippets of audio, just enough to plant doubt. Let him squirm, let his own house fracture. My focus was Jessica. One evening, she confronted me in the kitchen, her voice raw. Why are you doing this? You've ruined me already. What more do you want? I set my coffee down, met her gaze. I want you to feel what I felt. Every second of it. You don't get to walk away clean. She flinched, tears welling, but I turned away. The next day, I escalated. I hired a lawyer, drafted divorce papers, but I didn't file them yet. Instead, I left them on the counter, a constant threat. I drained our joint account, moving the money into a new one she couldn't touch, leaving her just enough to scrape by. She'd always handled our finances loosely. Now she had nothing to fall back on. Her boutique closed a month later. The rent went unpaid, the landlord unforgiving. I watched her pack up the last of her inventory, her hands shaking as she boxed dresses and necklaces. "This was my dream," she whispered, more to herself than me. I said nothing, just let the silence answer. That night, I took her ring, the one she'd left behind, and melted it down in my workshop. She didn't know yet, but I'd turn it into something else, a symbol of her ruin. The cruelty felt right, a balm to the wound she'd carved in me. By spring, Jessica was a shell. The divorce papers sat unsigned, a guillotine waiting to drop. She'd lost her family, her friends, her business. Everything but the house, and even that I controlled. I'd changed the locks, given her a single key she had to ask for each day. It was petty, but it kept her tethered, dependent, a prisoner in the life she'd betrayed. I started rumors at her old gym, her book club, places she'd once found solace. People whispered about her, avoided her. She stopped leaving the house, her world shrinking to its walls. I worked late, came home to her sitting in the dark, staring at nothing. "You've won," she said once, her voice flat. "Is this enough?" "No," I replied and meant it. I wasn't done. I found Mark's business website, sent an anonymous tip to a local journalist. Vague accusations of shady deals, tied to his name. It wouldn't destroy him, but it'd rattle his cage, keep him looking over his shoulder. Jessica heard about it from a lingering friend, one of the few who still spoke to her, and begged me to stop. "He's gone, Daniel. Leave him alone. You don't get to care about him," I said, and walked away. Then came the ring. I'd melted it into a small, twisted pendant, ugly and jagged. I hung it on a chain, left it on her pillow. She found it that night, gasped, and dropped it like it burned. "What is this?" she asked, voice trembling. "Your wedding ring," I said. "Remade. Wear it or don't. It's yours now." She didn't touch it again, but I saw her staring at it sometimes, a haunted look in her eyes. It was perfect, a constant reminder, a scar she couldn't hide from. Her health faltered next. Stress, maybe, or guilt. She lost weight, her skin paling, her hands unsteady. I didn't soften. I cooked for myself, left her to fend with whatever scraps remained. She'd brought this on herself, I reasoned. Let her reap it. Summer arrived, and the final blow took shape. Jessica's birthday was in July, a day we'd once celebrated with trips or dinners. This year, I planned something different. I invited her parents, her sister Emily, a few old friends, people she hadn't seen since the fallout. I told them it was a surprise, a chance to reconcile. They came, wary but curious, filling the living room with strained chatter. Jessica walked in, expecting an empty house, and froze. Her mother's face hardened. Emily turned away. The friends murmured awkwardly. I stepped forward, holding a cake I'd baked. Chocolate, her favorite, but I'd written "Happy Birthday, Liar" in red icing. The room went silent as she read it, her hands covering her mouth. "Daniel, what?" her father started, but I cut him off. "She's been lying to all of you," I said, calm, deliberate. "About where she's been, who she's been with. I thought you should know the truth." I set the cake down, pulled out a stack of printed emails, redacted, just enough to prove her deceit, and handed them out. Her mother skimmed one, gasped, and dropped it. Emily stormed out. The friends left in a hurry, whispering. Jessica sank to the floor, sobbing, her family glaring at me, at her, at the wreckage. "You're a monster," her father said to me, but I shrugged. "She made me one," I replied. They left, abandoning her again, and I stood over her, watching the last threads of her old life unravel. That night, she signed the divorce papers, her signature shaky. I filed them the next day, and she moved out a week later, into a cheap apartment with nothing but a suitcase and that twisted pendant. I kept the house, sold her boutique's remnants, and started over. She'd paid, not with her life, but with everything that made it hers. And I felt, not peace, but a hollow victory, sharp and cold. It was enough. For now. The divorce was finalized by late August, the papers stamped and filed, a quiet end to 12 years. Jessica was gone, her absence a strange echo in the house. The furniture stayed, but her touch, the vases she'd filled with flowers, the curtains she'd sewn, felt like ghosts. I didn't redecorate. I let it sit, a museum of what was, while I adjusted to this new, solitary life. Work kept me busy, my engineering projects a lifeline to sanity, but the nights were long, and the silence gnawed. I heard about Jessica through whispers. Tom, still on retainer, fed me updates. She'd taken a job at a grocery store, cashiering, a far cry from her boutique days. Her apartment was a cramped studio downtown, the kind with thin walls and flickering lights. She'd cut her hair short, dyed it a dull blonde, as if trying to shed the woman she'd been. I didn't care, not really, but knowing she was scraping by kept the ember of my revenge glowing. Mark, too, hadn't escaped unscathed. The journalist I'd tipped ran a small piece, nothing concrete, just enough to stir questions. His business took a hit, clients pulling back, his wife growing distant. Tom saw them arguing outside a restaurant once, her face tight with suspicion. I didn't send more evidence. I didn't need to. The seed was planted, and it was growing on its own. But I wasn't done with Jessica. Not entirely. One evening, flipping through old photos, I found a stack from our early years. Trips to the coast, her smiling in my arms. I could have burned them, but instead, I mailed them to her, no note, just the images. Let her see what she'd thrown away. Tom said she'd stopped going out after that, her curtains always drawn. Good. Let her stew in it. I started running again, something I hadn't done since college. The rhythm of my feet on pavement cleared my head, burned off the lingering rage. Friends, ones who'd stuck by me, noticed the change, invited me out. I went, laughed, felt human again. But the cruelty I'd unleashed lingered, a shadow I couldn't shake. It wasn't guilt. It was satisfaction, cold and steady. Fall brought rain, endless sheets of it, turning Portland into a gray blur. I thrived in it, the weather matching my mood. Jessica's birthday stunt had severed her last ties. Her parents stopped calling. Emily blocked her number. She was alone, and I'd made sure of it. But I wanted one more twist, something to seal her isolation. I remembered her old dream, writing a book, a memoir of her travels before we met. She'd started it years ago, pages tucked in a drawer. I'd found them after she left, half-finished, scribbled with her hopes. I scanned them, edited them slightly, adding subtle lies, exaggerating her flaws, and sent them to a small press under her name. They published it, a thin volume titled Wanderer's Regrets, marketed as a cautionary tale. I made sure it hit local bookstores, sent copies to her old friends, her family. The fallout was swift. Emily called me, furious, thinking Jessica had aired their dirty laundry. "She's blaming me for things I never did," she shouted. I played dumb, said Jessica must have written it herself. The book sold poorly, but the damage was done. Her name tied to a narrative of deceit and self-pity. Jessica confronted me, banging on my door one rainy night, soaked and wild-eyed. "Why? Why this?" she yelled, holding a crumpled copy. "You wanted to be a writer," I said, calm, shutting the door in her face. She stood there, screaming, until a neighbor called the cops. They escorted her away, and I watched from the window, rain streaking the glass. Felt final, a last cut to her pride. Mark's life kept unraveling too. His wife left him, took the kids, citing irreconcilable differences. Tom said he'd moved into a bachelor pad, drinking more, losing contracts. I didn't gloat, didn't need to. Their worlds were collapsing, and I'd lit the match. Winter settled in, harsh and biting. I sold the house, too many memories etched into its walls. I bought a condo downtown, sleek and modern. A clean slate. The move felt like shedding skin, leaving the old Daniel behind. I dated a little, casual, nothing serious, testing the waters. Women liked my quiet intensity, my dry humor, but I kept them at arm's length. Trust was a fractured thing now. Jessica's grocery job didn't last. Tom said she'd been fired, caught slipping cash from the register. Desperation, maybe, or just carelessness. She moved again, a cheaper place on the city's edge, a room in a boarding house. Her health was failing, he reported, coughing fits, thin frame, no insurance. I didn't pity her. She'd chosen this path, and I'd only paved it. I sent her one last package. A framed photo from our wedding, her in white, me beaming. On the back, I wrote, "You broke this." Tom said she burned it in a trash can outside her place, flames licking the night. I smiled when he told me, a grim satisfaction settling in. She could destroy the evidence, but not the truth. Mark hit rock bottom around Christmas. His business folded, bankruptcy filed. He'd been seen at a bar, drunk, ranting about a crazy ex who'd ruined him, me, I assumed. I didn't care enough to confirm. His ruin was a footnote, a bonus to Jessica's downfall. I threw a New Year's party at the condo, friends and colleagues filling the space with noise and warmth. I laughed, toasted, felt alive. But late that night, alone with a glass of whiskey, I thought of her, of them, and the cruelty I'd wielded. It wasn't joy I felt, but a dark, steady calm. I'd taken everything, left them with nothing. It was enough. Spring returned, tentative and green. I'd settled into the condo, my life a rhythm of work, runs, and quiet nights. The rage had faded, replaced by a strange emptiness. Not regret, but a void where Jessica once lived. I didn't miss her, not the woman she'd become, but the idea of us. The years before the betrayal haunted me sometimes. Tom's last update came in April. Jessica had vanished, no forwarding address, no trace. The boarding house said she'd left in the night, owing rent, taking only a duffel bag. Maybe she'd fled the city, the state, chasing a fresh start. I didn't care to find her. She'd carry her scars wherever she went, and that was my victory. Mark surfaced briefly, working construction up north, a shadow of his old self. His ex-wife had full custody. His name mud in Portland's business circles. I let him fade from my radar, his punishment complete. The USB drive sat in a safe, untouched, a relic of my vengeance. I met someone new, Lydia, an architect with sharp eyes and a quiet strength. We clicked over coffee, then dinners, then long walks. She didn't ask about Jessica, sensed the weight without prying. I liked that. With her, I felt a flicker of something, hope, maybe, or just peace. I didn't push it, let it grow slow. One day, cleaning out a drawer, I found Jessica's pendant, the melted ring, twisted and ugly. I'd forgotten it, left it behind in the move. I held it, the metal cold, then tossed it into the trash. It clinked against the bin, a final note in a long, bitter song. By summer, Lydia and I were steady, not rushing, just building something real. She moved in, her books mixing with mine, her laugh filling the condo. It wasn't love yet, but it was close, and that was enough. The past receded, a distant storm I'd weathered. I ran into an old friend of Jessica's at a cafe, Claire, who'd cut ties after the birthday disaster. She looked uneasy, said Jessica had called her once, months back, from somewhere east, Chicago, maybe. She sounded lost, Claire said, hesitant. Asked about you. I nodded, said nothing, paid for my coffee, and left. Lost or not, Jessica was gone from me. Mark's name popped up in a news blip, arrested for a bar fight, minor charges. I skimmed it, felt a twinge of grim amusement, then forgot it. They were footnotes now, their lives unraveling while mine rebuilt. On a warm July night, Lydia and I sat on the balcony, wine in hand, city lights sprawling below. She asked, soft, "You ever think about her?" I paused, then said, "Not anymore." It was true. The revenge, the cruelty had served its purpose, purged the pain, left me free. I squeezed Lydia's hand, smiled, and let the past sink into the dark. It was over. I'd won.